So step 11. The ACA version is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. We'll do the Tony A's 12-step version of it as well. It's very similar. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our higher power, praying only for knowledge of its will for us and the power to carry it out. So I think the only difference between them is one uses the word God and the other one uses the word higher power. And in some ways, a higher power phrase can be a broader phrase. So we'll mix it up. We're not trying to proclaim any particular kind of beliefs or anything like that. So we might go into this a little bit more. And what did I call it? Maturing our spiritual relationship. So I think that phrase, maturing our spiritual relationship, yeah, I think that describes very well what they say in step 11 here. Yeah, our relationship, step 11 is the focus on our spiritual support, our relationship with our higher power, applying the knowledge we have gained to mature our healing. That's my adaptation of it for us. And yeah, I do want to dig into this a little bit. And just say if anybody has anything that's on their mind or anything like that, do put it into the chat and I'll come to it. Or I'll include it in what I'm saying, I'll come to it. So I'm just trying to remember a while back, about 3 months ago, the introduction that I gave to God and the higher power. And it turns up a lot in the 12 steps. I'll just say it as it says in Tony A's step 2. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could bring us to clarity. So it's this idea, or this reality of a power greater than ourselves. So that power can include us too. That's, on my perception of things, it does. So if you perceive things in another way, then just use your own perception. I'm not asking you to use mine. Just take what's useful for you. So this idea of a power greater than ourselves, this is it. This is what they mean by the higher power, or what some people mean by God. It's a power greater than ourselves. And it makes a lot of sense because obviously reality is greater than ourselves, where there's 7 of us here, and so that's more than one of us here. So reality is greater than you or me. So we can imagine, define our higher power simply in terms of that, power greater than ourselves. And if we go all the way with that perception, with that line of understanding, we can imagine that there is the power which includes all power. The all-powerful, but the all-powerful kind of gets a little bit mixed up with in terms of action. So we have this crossover that if you're powerful, you have great capacity of action. And so that kind of takes us down a different route, really. Is that enough? is that enough to understand and to recognize that, we're a part of nature. Nature's part of a greater reality, is part of a power greater than ourselves, and we're part of that. And so this whole process that we see throughout the 12 steps, which is of developing a relationship with that power greater than ourselves, because our reality just by ourselves is too limited. It's not giving us what we need. It's missing a dimension of our own natural understanding. Because whether you grew up with religion or not with religion, if you grew up with nature, if you experience the seasons and you're a little bit sensitive to what's going on, you can see and experience that we're in a reality greater than ourselves. So that might just be enough. But what we need to do is to develop that, because the stronger, not the stronger our perception, that's not really where I want to come to it from. The stronger our relationship is with our higher power, the greater the source of strength that we have, a strength which is not dependent on us. That's one of the advantages of having that understanding of the higher power. It gives us access to that which is greater than us. And that's really what step 11 is focusing on, using prayer, meditation, or whatever other methods that you might have to improve our conscious contact with our higher power. So I also make a quick reference here to Hindu tradition, and specifically the yoga tradition. Most people know about yoga is actually only a small part of yoga. It's one discipline within it, or one school in it, which is called Hatha yoga. It's the physical-based yoga. So that's mostly what we know. So that's getting the body into a state of purity, and by having the body into a state of purity, then this relationship with the higher power in Hindu terms develops. But what they also had was in yoga, there was also Bhakti yoga, Jnana yoga, and Raja yoga. Bhakti yoga, and I think it's worth mentioning here, Bhakti yoga was the yoga of devotion. So you can also understand that as being the yoga of love, or the yoga of compassion. All of those things fit into it quite well. So it's a discipline which is based on using our emotions in order to purify ourselves. So we're purifying ourselves through compassion, through love, and in the Hindu tradition, Bhakti yoga would also include the veneration to deities. There was also Jnana yoga, remember the pronunciation right, which has to do with the yoga of the mind. You can put it like that. But it's to create clarity in the mind, and with that clarity, and that clarity is brought about through this conscious contact with the higher power. And then Raja yoga, which is the royal yoga, not simply for royalty, but it's known as the royal yoga, and there was a combination of the others. So all the other ones applied. So I just sort of mentioned that just to suggest a little bit there are more ways of having a conscious contact with our higher power than prayer and meditation. It can be through our study with mind. And prayer and meditation overlap a little bit with Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. So, but it can be through our mind. It can be through our expression of love and compassion. It can be, there's Karma Yoga. I knew there was missing one. There's Karma Yoga as well, which is the yoga of action, which is the yoga of service, or doing things out of kindness and generosity, out of charity. Charity would be kind of like that. But it doesn't mean working for a charity. It means, giving where you can. So that's what this step is. And so, yeah, they mention here prayer and meditation. Well, meditation, we know well, we use that tool here. And, in meditation, once we're connecting with our consciousness and we look quite deeply into that, we go through stages of identification. For a while, we often think it's my consciousness because I'm experiencing it. But then what develops is the question of, well, I'm conscious of being conscious. So then I'm consciousness. I'm no longer just the things I'm experiencing, like my weight, what I can hear, what I can see, mantra or whatever. I'm not just identified with the objects of experience. I'm actually identifying with consciousness itself. And when we try to define what consciousness is, even scientifically today, we still have some serious problems describing that. So there is the possibility that what we mean by consciousness itself, not our consciousness of a particular thing, which is slightly different. The consciousness itself, it could be compared with the idea or with the meaning of spirit, yeah? Or God's essence, or Godhead, or something like that. There's a lot of grounds for seeing that. So when we dig into the meditation experience further, and we're experiencing being conscious of being conscious, when we practice that more and we notice that more, that practice has an impact on us. And our identity starts to free itself up a little bit of our experiences, our attachments, our suffering, and so on. We go into this more peaceful place because consciousness doesn't itself suffer. So we can be conscious of our suffering, but consciousness doesn't actually suffer. If we're aware of ourselves suffering, but our awareness isn't actually suffering. So that makes it a very interesting thing and gives this a different sort of dimension, which really relates more to the spirit and a more religious vocabulary. Obviously in the Hindu tradition and the Buddhist tradition they have as well, and some of the Buddhists don't absolutely deny any idea of an external God. Some Buddhists completely deny that. But that doesn't take away from their spirituality, because their spirituality is based on experience rather than belief. So it's a focus on our spiritual support, our relationship with our higher power, applying the knowledge we have gained to mature our healing. So over the last period, we've been going through these steps, discovering what their tools are and how to use those tools, those perceptions, those questions, those inspirations, how we can use them to support our own healing process. And part of that, a large part of that, influencing many of the steps, is this other aspect of ourselves, the spiritual aspect of ourselves. And essentially, the 12-step program is a spiritual program, and it's developing that. And clearly, I think if we have a stronger spiritual relationship active in our lives, I say active because I'm talking about more than just the idea of God. I'm talking about the practice of the different things we've mentioned, which create a more conscious contact. So when things get very silent in meditation, we can understand that as being a conscious contact. It doesn't have to be such a silent experience if we have the focus. So we might, for instance, well, I'll take it in general first. So somebody might decide to do a charitable act every day as a expression of their spirituality. So every day when they do something for somebody, that's expressing, and the expression itself is expressing their relationship with their spiritual relationship, and that expression itself is the conscious contact. Conscious contact isn't after it, it's the activity itself is the conscious contact. We're coming to the end of the 12 steps. There is one more. One of the things that we realize is a way to put this: find the knowledge we have gained to mature our healing. So this is really focusing it on ourselves. So so it's using the tools, it's taking responsibility for all the tools and perspectives we've been working on and applying them. Well, we can only apply what we've worked on. We can't apply something that we haven't done yet. And there's no it's not a case of doing the 12 steps and then they're done. Doing the 12 steps is an introduction to a process that we continue to practice the useful elements of for the rest of our lives. That's typically so. Typically, they don't go through the 12-step process. It isn't gone through once. People go through it again and again and again. We will be doing something different after this, though. I'll come to that later. Our focus here is healing, which is the same in 12-step traditions. Their focus is also healing. However, what they're healing, what the focus of what they're healing is different from us. Our focus on healing stems from the physical illnesses that or illness that we have. So some of these things are harder to imagine, or we need to imagine them differently. We can't, or we find it difficult to imagine doing a charitable act for somebody. That might be kind of difficult for us to imagine, or it mightn't really express something more spiritual inside us. But there can be lots of different ways of doing that, where we're expressing that constant contact, that conscious contact. So, for instance, if we treat ourselves with kindness, that, for instance, is one of my favorites. But you have your own as well. So if you do that practice, that practice which comes from a sense of love. Yeah? So if we practice that kindness to ourselves or others, whatever we can do, it doesn't. I don't think it matters a huge amount who we do it to. Eventually we'll start doing the other side. So I think it's okay. So when we're practicing kindness to ourselves, that can be an expression of our spiritual knowledge. Or when practicing it towards other people, that can be a practice of our spiritual knowledge, or our conscious contact with God, our higher power. So there can be a lot of other subtle ways of doing it. Our entire or parts of our physical healing and support process that we have ongoing, the supplements we take, the exercises we take, the plans we make, the way we respond to people, and the experience which we have going on right now. All of these things can be used as a means of developing the conscious contact. Now, they do say a couple of other things here, which I'll come back to, and I didn't include it in mine, where they say praying only for knowledge of its will for us and the power to carry it out. So if we take it that we are part of the reality greater than ourselves, we're part of that, and that within it, everything can be imagined as having a purpose. Like the purpose of a light bulb is to give light. So it only fulfills its purpose when the light is on. So until then, its purpose is just a potential, it's not active. So when we're looking for this knowledge of the greater power's will for us, I think there's a lot of unpacking that has to go into that. Because we're part of the greater reality, we're automatically part of its will, part of its purpose. We're not outside of it. How can that be true? So we're part of it, but we may not feel, and it's not just about us, it's a very common feeling, that what's our role in this? We don't understand. This is very common from the time people are children, it's a very common experience. And we also have to face the limitations that we have due to illness, which makes it harder to imagine as well. I think it's a valuable question, though, to ask ourselves, is within my limitations, I have to put that, within my limitations, what's the spiritual purpose of my life? It's not about finding the right set of words. It's more about feeling the question. And in feeling that question, we might also have to face our fear, because we might feel like we've really no idea. Maybe it's to live with as much harmony in our environment, with other people, with ourselves, as much as possible. I think it's worth considering. Praying only for knowledge of its will for us and the power to carry it out. So our power is limited. Everybody's power is limited. I, I often think that I'm really inadequate. I'm aware of lots of mistakes and shortcomings that I have and so on. And it's no matter what, it's limited. What I'm capable of doing, it's limited. So we have to work within our limitations, because if we don't, we're going to fail. Maybe it's enough of a spiritual purpose is to learn to practice healing, to really heal within our lives, within ourselves, and how that will change us. And that will impact on the people around us as well. Because all of our individual realities contribute to our collective reality. So even though our power is limited, and with chronic and degenerative illness, our power is limited a lot more, and far, far more. We don't have the energy to go out there and change the world or save the world, or, you know. Well, I personally, if I really have to answer that question, yeah, I definitely would consider it healing. I think back to, I think it was 5.5 years ago when I moved into where I live now, and I was hospitalized just before it, and I was in really bad shape, um, and I was falling asleep 9 times a day, so I was in pretty bad shape. Most of the time, I was just sitting in the armchair and feeling completely inadequate, completely hopeless, helpless. But they weren't my only feelings. And whilst I felt those things, I could accept those feelings. I was like accepting them. I was healing with them, not healing against them, not healing to get rid of them. But in that acceptance and in that resting, that was really when I really got deeply into resting healing. I realized how powerful it is. So maybe that's enough, maybe its will is to teach us to rest and heal. Maybe it's something else. We can be open with that. We don't have to limit our understanding of it. Our answer to that can be as we understand it today, as I understand the purpose of my life today. Is whatever. And tomorrow that might change a little bit. Well, I think that's my introduction really to step 11. So we can do some meditation with it. Yeah. Unless people have questions, or if you want to share your response, about any of that, developing the conscious contact with your higher power, trying to understand our place in the greater context, and realizing the power that we have to carry that out. If you want to comment on or express what any of that means to you, I'd really like to hear. I'd really